Hello everyone, my name is Corey Minkoff, and today for my TED Talk we're going to be talking about what's wrong with people, particularly why you should be making better use of your outdoor voice. So, to start, I've always been a very loud person. It's from the time that I could really talk, I've always struggled to control my own volume, and that I always had this abundance of energy that would really get me into trouble a lot of the time as well. I was frequently the class clown throughout most of elementary school and into middle school. And it was a real problem that I struggled a lot being able to fit in with a lot of my peers. And for a long time, I was told I just must have had a big personality, but I was never really given any concrete reason why I felt so different from most of my peers. Now, eventually, that reason became clear when in seventh grade I was diagnosed with ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And most people are aware of some of the trademark symptoms of the disorder, things like frequent inattention to detail and trouble focusing. Those things are in the name, and that obviously people would have trouble focusing and they would have a lot of energy, hyperactivity. But there are more serious symptoms that often aren't noted, that most of the general public isn't aware of, that can seriously disrupt your life and make it extremely difficult to feel like you fit in. Things like impulsivity, frequent and drastic mood swings, a hot temper, all of these things I dealt with throughout my childhood and still deal with now. But most notably, the thing that has had arguably the biggest impact on my life is increased volume and variability in pitch when talking, along with particular patterns such as increased number of vocal pauses, which makes it very difficult to fit in with the rest of the crowd. Now, I'm far from the only person who struggles with ADHD, especially in the United States, in our own country, as experts estimate that roughly 10% of all children and 5% of all adults in the United States currently live with ADHD. But it's not necessarily clear that those numbers are growing, but there is a scientific consensus that ADHD is one of the most common diagnosable mental disorders in the United States today. And I think that what's important to take away from this is that the struggles of people with ADHD really shed light on a bigger problem in our society, and that it's not just people with mental disorders that struggle with containing their own volume, but it's something that we all think about consciously on a daily basis, that everyone thinks consciously about how their own voice may impact the way that others think of them. Now, if I were to ask you to scream as loudly as possible as you could in a public place, like in Anschutz, like, would you really want to do it? Probably not, and for good reason. It would be really inappropriate. And there's a time and place to use the outdoor voice, but also, why do we care so much about the way that strangers perceive us? I think that so much of the reason that we stifle our own voices and try to reduce our own volume is to really please others and not look like we're the ones that are weird or different in a room. And the reason this is so important is because science shows us that raising our voices may actually improve our overall health. There is a doctor called Dr. Arthur Janov who said that regular screaming could function as a basic release for repressed anger that, when bottled over a long period of time, can lead to serious physical ailments. Most notably, he talked about high blood pressure, which can inevitably lead to further complications in your health. In his own words, he said that the #1 killer in the world today is not cancer or disease, it is repression. And that he firmly believed that when we're actually able to scream and let it all out, that we really do become healthier people overall. So in conclusion, you shouldn't allow your own voice to be ever stifled by others. Obviously, from what we talked about today, raising your voice isn't necessarily just for those who want to behave poorly. It can be a therapeutic release that we should all take advantage of. And especially if you have trouble controlling your own voice, it's not something that you should ever feel self-conscious of, even if you're making an effort to try to contain it. But more importantly also, when you stifle your own voice, you're stifling your voice for the opinions of others, and that you're trying to please others over yourself. And ultimately, I think that people should be more confident in themselves and take more pride in the way that they speak and the way that they act, and know that it's the way that they were intended to be. And there's no judgment for those people who are naturally quieter, but for those who have a little extra volume, and were born that way, you should be comfortable with your natural voice, because it's the way that God intended you to be. And finally, it wouldn't be a good TED Talk if I didn't have my sources. Check those out if you'd like to. Thank you all for listening.